just a hack. He's just an absolute hack. And he gets his ass kicked by his teammates every week. It's just, it's terrible. It's just terrible.
Welcome back to another episode of the Believe in NFL Draft Prospects podcast. I'm Joe DeLeone, joined by Ryan Roberts. Today we are moving, thanks to the little cute little wave you did there, Ryan.
You're welcome.
You completely threw me off by doing that. I don't know why. Today we've got Edge. We're moving on to another really talented year for pass rushers in the 2023 NFL Draft. It just so happens that we're starting off with, I would argue, the most elite player in the class, Will Anderson, and then a counterpart, I think is the only way to really compare the two, Derrick Hall from Auburn. We probably should have just done a Will Anderson show, Ryan, but we have to try and fit in another guy. And Derrick Hall's fine, and we're going to talk about Derrick Hall. It sounds like you're higher on Derrick Hall than I am, but nonetheless, we're going to get to both these guys. I think we should spend most of our time on Will Anderson, though, Ryan.
I mean, I don't disagree. I mean, he was a tough one, man, because what was the options, Joe? I could have put him up against like Miles Murphy or something, but they're just completely different players, you know? Like, I mean, him and Hall have similar body types. They're both Alabama guys, right? One at Auburn, one at Alabama. Like, it made some parallel sense. I would just like people out there, when we say Will Anderson versus Derrick Hall today, we're not trying to make an argument that
we're not
Derrick
comparing.
Hall is, right.
We kind of stopped doing the comparisons anyways. It ends up being like a joint scouting report rather than a comparison. I think we stopped doing it pretty early on, and I tried to stop phrasing the episodes as such, but nonetheless, we've got these two guys.
Well, I would, and just to that point, right? When we're figuring out our matchups for Edge Week or the pairings for Edge Week, like I put Isaiah Foskey and Miles Murphy together.
Makes
for instance,
sense,
right? And it's like their body types are very similar. And then I think I did. What was the other one I did? Did I do Will McDonald and Nolan Smith? Right? Like they're a little bit of like similar body types again. Will Anderson doesn't have a counterpart really. So it's like we had to find someone that has some type of similarity, and they both play in the same regional schools, and they both have similar body types. And that's why we came up with this comparison. Right. And it's, just want to throw that out there.
Right. I'm more so setting up, not so much that I have an issue with the matchup, but more so Will Anderson's so freaking good that we could probably sit here and talk about him for the entirety of the 20-minute episode, because that's the type of a player he is.
He's a decent player, man. He's a decent player. Did you see someone on Twitter say the other day that they thought he was a little overrated? Did you see it?
Well, yeah, you sent it to me, and then you proceeded to argue with him.
I forgot I said that to you.
The guy didn't even have 100 followers, Ryan. I don't know why. See, I read that tweet, and I'm like, okay, this guy's figuring it out, and I'm not going to waste my time. And if he doesn't figure it out, it's his problem.
Well, I mean, but there's trouble there for me, right? I'm an asshole, so I see something incorrect and I correct it. It's just.
Well, welcome to the bad boys of draft Twitter, Joe DeLeone.
Chill out. That's you, man. That's you. That's you and Sean Anderson, man. Sean Anderson's the mayor, and you're the bad boy.
But I don't know if we're really draft, or he's not. Definitely.
Oh, he's a draft Twitter guy, 100%.
I don't know about that. He's not active enough. Before we get to today's discussion, I want to tell you folks about Bet Online. Our partners at Bet Online continue to be the number one source for all of your betting needs and sports info. NHL playoffs are done. NBA playoffs are done. If you're like me and you're waiting for the start of the NFL season and you're bored out of your mind watching baseball, I can't stand watching baseball, and you need to make it a little bit more entertaining. Put a little money down, makes it a little bit more exciting, so you're not banging your head against the wall hoping for the football season to come back around. Head to BetOnline's website or use your mobile device to sign up today to receive your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. Just use our promo code BELIEVE to get the bonus and get in on the action. BetOnline, where the game starts. All right, Ryan, let's start off here with Will Anderson. Physically, he's pretty thick for a guy that's only listed at 240, which I thought was very promising. But when we're looking at this guy across the board, the dude checks every freaking box that you want from a 6'3", 250-ish pound edge rusher. He's explosive. He is instinctual. He is strong, which is something that you don't really expect for a lighter edge rusher. he was justifiably very, very dominant, has the statistics to back it up. But even on the reps where he's not necessarily winning, he is also dominating opposing offensive linemen. I don't think anyone should be overthinking this kid. And he legitimately should be considered to be the number one prospect in this class based on all the traits that he brings to the table.
He is one of the, I'll say this, right? Let's start here. He's a very odd player, wouldn't you say? Like, he's a little odd. And odd is not always a negative, because like I look at if I was an offensive tackle looking at Will Anderson, I'd be like, all right, this kid is an outside track demon. He's going to have a ton of speed, which he does. He has a lot of speed. And I'm going to have to overcompensate to meet that outside ability with my foot quickness. And then Will Anderson puts his foot in the ground, and he is about as strong a football player as I have ever seen for a 245-pound guy. Like, he has some outrageous ability to create power, man. Like, he puts guys on skates, which are like, I mean, the kid's 6'3.5", 6'4", 245 pounds, and just such an incredible power profile. I think the first thing to talk about him, Joe, is like 4-3 defensive end or 3-4 stand-up. I mean, where would you prefer him? I guess stand-up maybe, but because I think he can play in space a little bit, but then you kind of hit in the little troubling area where, like, I want this guy going after the quarterback all the time. Like, I don't want him. Because, they actually changed. Alabama kind of changed his position a little bit. That spot that he actually plays is more meant to be like that on-ball Sam that can also play in space, play, curl flat, play in the slot, like that type of dude. And when Will Anderson got there, they were just kind of like, you go that way instead. Like, we're not going to drop you in space a ton. So, yeah.
I don't think we need to – I don't want to pigeonhole him, and I understand the discussion of saying, like, which defense does he go with. He's one of the few prospects we can sit here and argue I think he can play either. I hope that he doesn't go to a team that runs a stand-up 3-4 and makes him drop into space more than he's necessary to do so. He's able to do it, which is a positive in my eyes, because that makes him draftable by really any defense. That's what I love about him, is that he can play either effectively, because he might not be a hulking, massive 4-3 defensive end, but he plays the run really freaking well. And I would argue he's almost as good. Actually, he is as good as a run defender as he is as a pass rusher. I think it's pretty equivalent there. The one thing that I wrote down, and I want to keep pointing back to, that makes him so good is his instincts and his motor. Instinctually, the guy always found the football. He immediately reacted, and it's like he's not even thinking, and he's able to make plays on the football. But the motor I'm referencing, the guy doesn't stop. There's a lot of times where if you want to know where Will Anderson is and you want to stop the play at the very end of the play, he's usually within a couple yards, and that's rare to find with an edge rusher.
His motor, like you said, and his closing speed are outrageous, man. He closes so quickly. As a true rusher, I wouldn't say like he's the bendiest guy of all time. Like I didn't see him bend outside track a ton. What I see is that, like, hey, he's got vertical push. He's incredibly explosive. And then he gets inside goes, man, and he just slips gaps so easily. I've seen comparisons already out there for Von Miller.
So that was my comp, is because I looked up the physical profile. I think this is a 4-4, at least a 4-5 guy, without a doubt. I was going to come here with Von Miller and ask your thoughts on it, and I was going to say, do you have this? Either you're going to love it or you're going to hate that comp. But I think this is Von Miller 100%.
I don't hate the comp. I think he's a little different. Well, stronger, yeah. And then Von was a little more versatile. Like, he could play a little more in space, and I want Will Anderson. One guy that I've heard also thrown out there, Joe, because he was also a former Alabama player, is Derrick Thomas, that used to play with the Kansas City Chiefs. That has, I still think he has the most sacks in a game in NFL history. I think he had like 6 sacks in a game. Like, this kid, and a more modern. Von Miller's not bad. Like, I really can't think of another one where I just go like, yeah, that's a really good one, because he is a little bit of a smaller, lightly built stand-up rusher. Like, that's kind of more his profile. I think he put the hand in the dirt and use his power, obviously, but like, he's 6'3", 6'4", 245 pounds. Like, that's not a traditional 4-3 defensive end for the most part, right? Like, he's a little bit of a lighter build in that sense. But all that to say is, you're going to come up with a lot of comparisons for Will Anderson. They're all going to be special football players because he is a really good player, man. Plays so hard. Because, like, let's be honest, he could just settle on his traits and he could be a dominant football player, right? Because he's incredibly explosive, incredibly strong. He could just do those things, and you'd be like, yep, he's going to get sacks in the NFL. He's going to be a really good football player in the NFL. Then you add into the fact that he has high efforts as a rusher and high effort as a run defender. That's where he gets a lot of cleanup sacks. That's where he gets a lot of, second effort type of plays in the run game. He makes a variety of plays just off of sheer opportunity because he's playing so hard. It's not anything to do with talent. The talent is easy to see. The talent is easy to evaluate. When you put both those things together, could be the best edge to come out in years. I mean, I think the conversation is also all ultimately going to be, we've seen guys like Chase Young, Nick and Joey Bosa, Myles Garrett's, like that class of defensive end over the last, 7 to 8 years. Where does Will Anderson rank in there? Because I think we both agreed last year, Kayvon Thibodeau for me was close to that tier, right? Like I didn't think that he was quite in the conversation with the Myles Garrett's of the world and the Bosas and that type of thing, but he was an easy first round player, in my opinion, top 10 pick, but he was probably a tier down. Will Anderson's in that first tier. The question is, where is he in that tier? Is he potentially the best defensive end to come out in 10 years, 10, 15 years? Because then that's when we're starting talking about the word generational, because that literally is a generation, right? So that's the interesting conversation for me. Where does Will Anderson lie?
I don't think we need to overthink this. The guy's generational. I don't like if anyone wants to get upset because I'm willing to throw that word, that classification around so easily in my first year doing these evaluations and taking them seriously. The guy's freaking generational. We talked about the traits that he has, and I think even if he was half-assing it, he would still be talked about in the discussion of the first overall pick. He is that talented physically, but what has held back some of these prospects like a Trayvon Walker, like a Jadeveon Clowney, like a Kayvon Thibodeau, there are lots of times where, and even it came up with the Bosas, I think, too, is the motor. There's a lot of times with these guys where we bring up the conversation of like, well, he kind of loafs a little bit, and sometimes he's like kind of half-assing it on some of the tail ends of these plays. There's not a play where this guy takes off. And where you always are going to win with a prospect is when the talent matches the effort. And when you can see both of those things on tape, that's what the definition of generational to me. If you can line both of those things up, he is going to be one of the best edge rushers that we've seen in the past 10 years, as we're discussing right now. And I am confident, watching how hard he pushes himself on every single play, and I want to talk about some slight deficiencies that he does have, which is nothing major. I'm confident that he's going to work on improving them because he has that level of effort and it shows on tape.
Couple quick notes on Will Anderson Jr. One thing that I wrote down is he's got some crazy length considering he's not the biggest guy in the world, right? Like he's going to be 6'3" and so, yeah, dude, 34 plus inch arms, definitely. Don't you think?
Crap.
Like I think.
I didn't even think about that because I was so just in awe of everything else.
Kayvon Thibodeau had 34-inch arms, and I mean, Will's arms are like, his arms are almost down to his knees, man. Like his hands, like he's got some length to him. 100%. He's
not as long as Foskey though. Holy crap.
That's a completely different. That's a completely different body
type.
Yeah. Well, yeah, Isaiah Foskey's a little bit of a different athlete in terms of the size profile compared to Will Anderson, but yes, he. Yeah, I think length is going to pop. I think athleticism, he's going to test really well, in my opinion. He was a pretty much consensus 5-star coming out of high school. He's lived up to the conversation. The other thing I want to put out there, Joe, on Will Anderson is he had, 34 tackles for loss and 17 sacks, something like that, somewhere in that ballpark, right? There is a good possibility that he does not have near that production this year, and he's actually a better football player.
Yes. So that is the discussion point. That's one of my negatives. The other negative, I think, is not a concern. But my one negative with him is that during this draft process, his production is going to go down. We need to stop trying to act like it's not going to. We need to we can't pretend and tell ourselves that is a hot take. teams were starting to double team him last year, and he handled it pretty well. He is going to get double teamed every single play. Teams are going to run away from him. They're going to do everything possible to avoid the best player on the field on any given down, especially one who we just claimed to be generational. His statistics are going to drop. He is going to be very, very boring to evaluate, Ryan, because he is just going to be head up taking on double teams, and there's a good chance he might not be near the football a lot on a good amount of these plays.
Yeah, I don't even know about, not being around. I mean, just the reality is that he may go down 10 plus tackles for loss and 7 sacks. Like, he might have 20 tackles for loss and 10 sacks and still be as good a football player, or maybe better. Like, it's very possible, just because the attention, everyone. The good thing, though, that Alabama does have is that they have the other defensive outside linebacker, Dallas Turner, who's a freshman last year, who's a dog as well. So, I mean, good luck if you're going to say, we're just going to single Dallas Turner every single play because Will Anderson's not going to stop us. It's like, oh, okay, that's not still not going to work out so great for you. But yeah, I doubt the production is nearly as great as it was last year, because he just had one of the. I mean, let's be honest, that year was one of the best years we've ever seen from a defensive player. He should have won the Heisman, in my opinion.
Aiden Hutchinson being in the conversation over him was stupid. It was stupid.
Yeah.
Aiden Hutchinson wasn't that good last year. He was good, but he was not nearly as dominant as being considered to be a Heisman finalist.
Now, just point blank, Aiden Hutchinson was excellent. Will Anderson was about as good as you've ever seen play that position. Yeah, exactly. So I think that his production is not going to be nearly the same, but I think he's a slam dunk top. I almost say top 5 player, but he's a top 2 player in next year's class.
It's just a matter of if somebody wants to take Stroud or Bryce Young over him. That's literally what this is going to ultimately come down to.
It's a quarterback or it's a defensive end. It's
a quarterback or Will Anderson. That's what it's. So
whatever you want to call him. Yeah.
The one thing I just want to throw out there for him before we talk about Derrick Hall, I think the one negative, and this is me nitpicking here, I would like to see some more pass rush moves. I think that he really loves the long arm, and he loves to just stab guys in the chest, which, hell, man, it works. I think when you go up against some more creative and detailed offensive linemen that know he's going to do that in the NFL, he is not going to be as successful. He'll probably still be successful, but if he wants to take that next step, he just needs to incorporate some other moves. I didn't really see a rip. I didn't see a swim. I didn't see a spin. I didn't see any of those things.
Explosiveness is all.
It's just I'm gonna run. I'm gonna run full speed at you, and I'm gonna stab you in the chest with my long arm, and then I'm gonna keep running past you full speed, not slow down, and then eventually I'm gonna get to the quarterback.
And in his defense, if it's not broke, don't fix it. Right? Exactly. Yeah. I mean, at his level, it's no one can stop it. So let's just keep doing it. But I agree. We need to hit a cross chop or club rip. Ghosts, some type of secondary moves need to be put in there, spin, whatever you need to pop into the arsenal. The minute that Will Anderson has a full pass rush repertoire and a full pass rush plan, then he's unstoppable. I mean, he's already unstoppable on his level.
He's
on the NFL level, he'll be unstoppable.
Yeah,
100%. Yep.
Now here comes the underwhelming part. Derrick Hall, who similar build, listed at 6'3", 255 from Auburn.
Can I hit the verifieds on him real quick? Can I hit the verifieds?
Yeah, go ahead. What are the verifieds?
6'2" and 6'8", so 6'3".
Oh, okay.
259.
Oh, so he's a little bigger.
34.5-inch arms and over an 80-inch wingspan. So he's got some stuff, man.
So I think that
he had a big spring grade too from the NFL, by the way. A pretty big spring grade.
Saw that. Wasn't he a second, third?
I think a second round grade. Yeah.
Okay. I'm not that high on Derrick Hall. Okay, so here's my description of Derrick Hall. He actually compares well to Will Anderson, but it's like if Will Anderson didn't put everything together and he didn't have any of the instincts. I think there's value
Are you calling him dollar store Will Anderson right now?
I am absolutely calling him dollar store Will Anderson. Here's my description of him. He is very, very head first and similar approach where he's gonna run straight at you. I don't think he's as strong as Will Anderson, so this doesn't really work as well for him. But he still tries to bull rush where he's not as heavy, as heavy for a guy who should be bull rushing or strong. So I'd like to see a little more bend. I don't think he necessarily provides that type of bend where that he can turn the corner and those things. I also think instinctually and his tackling, like his instincts and his tackling are not that good. There were a good amount of times in the games that I watched of him where he's just diving all over the place, literally throwing himself at the quarterback and just completely missing. Probably would have had more production if he was able to locate the football better. And then also just does not really, I think, find and track the football as effectively. And I know I set myself up for failure having to watch this guy after Will Anderson, because he does none of the things that Will Anderson did. And my threshold for those traits is so high now that I started with Will Anderson. But I think Derrick Hall's fine. I just don't think he's like as cerebral and does a lot of the things well that you want with an edge rusher of his build.
Speaking of traits, Joe, you want to hear some traits here, man?
Yeah.
Out of what high school is he from? He's from Gulfport High School in Mississippi. He was a basketball player, which most guys are. He was also a finalist in the 200-meter dash for track and field. And he has 34+ inch arms, and he's incredibly explosive. So I am buying into these traits. I am. I agree with you. There's not a plan right now, much of one. But I have seen him win consistently around the track with his explosiveness at times. I don't think he's the bendiest guy of all time, like you kind of said, but I think he has really nice explosiveness and linear ability to win the outside track. And I think he has length. Anytime that you have the combination of the two, I'm going to bet on you a little bit. So I do think that this is a top 2 round type of player, ultimately. He had 9 sacks last year in his breakout season. I think he's a very good candidate to maybe, even produce at a higher level, double-digit sacks next year. So I don't think we disagree in the fact that he's not in the Will Anderson tier, obviously, right? Like he's not there. But Derrick Hall has a lot of traits to work with, man. Length, explosiveness, and he's still figuring it out. So I'm betting on this because I can always add moves to the arsenal. I can always add power. But if you have explosiveness and you have that length that he has, those traits matter so much at the edge spot. So I am buying into Derrick Hall a little bit because I think there are some special traits from a physical perspective.
Yeah, I could get those things, and the length and the speed. It's kind of weird seeing that he had some decent production. Like 9 sacks is a decent performance and a quality one in the SEC, having to go against most of those offensive tackles. A good amount of them are going to play in the NFL. Mm-hmm. I just need to see him put it together a little bit more. And I know that, and I know on this podcast, we try to talk traits and bank on upside.
Summer scouting, baby.
It's summer scouting. I'm wondering, like, does he mentally have the capacity to resolve those instinctual issues? Like, that's where I'm concerned, because again, this just feels like a dude who's just throwing himself at the football.
Did you watch the Alabama game?
I did not. I don't know. Did we have the Alabama game? I think we
had the Alabama game.
Okay, yep. I will watch the Alabama game. But what's your reasoning?
It's the perfect synopsis of Derrick Hall, in my opinion. Early on in the game, he's going against Evan Neal, and it's kind of the same thing like you're saying, man. There's a lot of stalemates, and there's a lot of, just kind of hitting your head against the wall and just kind of getting stoned at the line of scrimmage, right? But then he gets better throughout that game. And he ends, I think he had 3 sacks, 3.5 tackles for loss. Like, he had a big game against Alabama. My point is that we're seeing the glimpses of Derrick Hall right now. Last year, 2 years ago, he played, but last year was when he really played, right? So he hasn't had a ton of playing time at Auburn, but I think that the traits are all there, and I think you see the flashes. I am banking, and I'm fully transparent. I'm banking on him putting everything together this year. But if he does, the traits are all there, man. They're all there. I would not be shocked if Derrick Hall ends up being a first-round pick when it's all said and done, and I will be for sure not surprised, even if he doesn't take a massive step, if he's a top 64 pick next year. Like, I think that's the traits are too good to not. I mean, what's the kid that I always forget his name? Why do I do this? The kid that came out of University of Washington 2 years ago,
Joe Trion.
Joe Trion.
Who
if
Alex
Joe Trion
hated.
Yeah, but Joe Tryon was the same thing. Not the same thing. They're completely different players. But Joe Tryon had a lot of traits, and someone drafted him 32nd overall, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, because they said, "Oh, I can work with those traits."
Mm-hmm.
If you can look at Joe Tryon and say that dude has traits, I can bank on that in the first round. There's zero reason that Derrick Hall can't be in that conversation. Zero reason.
I don't know why, but for some reason I just hate the Auburn players. I don't know what it because I did the same thing with Tank Bigsby, where I came in here and I'm like, Tank Bigsby's not that good, and then you're like, I love Tank Bigsby.
I didn't love Tank Bigsby. Tank Bigsby was a good player, though. It's a good player.
You were very adamant about disagreeing with me on that episode, which
those are the only two players from Auburn that I like. Honestly, this cycle that I've watched, I watched like the Actually, I'm not gonna say this because we might watch another one later in the show, so I don't want to break. I don't want to. Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry. Forget it.
So you're planting the flag on him as a early day 2, late day 1. I think this is a
top 64 player. Top 64.
I think it's a late day 2 for me. I think this is mid to late 3rd round. I understand where you're coming from, but maybe it's because I didn't watch the Alabama game and I should have.
You should watch Alabama.
I watched him get some reps against Charles Cross. I picked the Mississippi State game with that intention. I forget what the other game that I watched on him. I didn't get all the way through it though, admittedly, but I just didn't. I didn't get as much of what I think you got, where I saw flashes of like, oh, this kid could be good. I saw a lot more frustration of like, how did he miss that tackle? Why did he launch himself at Will Rogers is the Mississippi State quarterback? Why did he launch himself at Will Rogers and not try to actually tackle him?
Oh man, you had to watch Will Rogers. I'm so sorry to hear that.
Yeah, I almost fired off a Will Rogers sucks tweet, but I was like, let's be positive.
He's a good college quarterback, man. He's just got a lollipop for
an arm. But it's one of those bits where everyone likes to play because he's a good college quarterback and he's in the most quarterback friendly scheme that he's better than he actually is. But fair. I'm not buying that. Yep. So that's the verdict on both these guys. Ryan, any closing thoughts on either of these players?
You need to appreciate traits at defensive end.
I watched Isaiah Foskey and I appreciated those traits.
Are you giving us a little teaser for the next episode, man? Are you doing that?
Yeah. I would think so. I'm making sure you don't have Derrick Hall higher than Foskey, right?
No.
Okay, good. No. All right, well, Foskey's going to be fun to talk about. I had a lot of fun watching Foskey because we're talking about how Will Anderson's unique. Foskey is definitely unique the way that he was used last year.
He's like Frankenstein, man.
Yeah. No, honestly, was not expecting the way that they used him. So if anyone wants,
they used him terribly. But yeah, anyway,
playing middle linebacker. I was really confused. At Joe DeLeone, at Rise and Draft, NFL Prospects Pod on Twitter, Hack City on YouTube. And wherever you're listening for audio, make sure you hit that subscribe button. We will be back tomorrow with Isaiah Foskey versus Miles Murphy from Clemson.
And we can do a verse on that one.
No.